While we're waiting for the slide deck to get worked out, we'll just do a quick round of introductions. My name is Sohail Sikora. I'm a product manager on the App Cloud team, and my responsibilities lie in the area of event-based integration. We're actually working on some pretty cool things, which you shouldn't listen to because we are under safe harbor, so please make any of your decisions based on products that are generally available. I like to talk about stuff I'm working on in the future, but you shouldn't listen to me too much about that. Dennis?
So I'm Dennis Thong. I'm a senior director in our advisory services practice. I'm a New York native. No, I'm an Australian that lives in New York City, and I run the New York Metro practice for our advisory services business. Together, me and Sohail were the authors of the Integration Patterns and Best Practices document that I'm sure you all know and love on our developer force documentation.
Sure. So in the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about why we need integration patterns, how we use patterns to solve real-world problems, give you a quick overview of some of the newer patterns that we are seeing in the industry and seeing our customers solve, show you a quick couple of demos, and then give you all a chance to ask questions. I know these sessions are very compact. It's like 30 minutes, but you can always ask us questions on the side after the session is done. So we'll get started very quickly. Patterns are very important. Patterns are how people solve problems in real life. Patterns are how we learned math, how we learned science, how we learned languages. And patterns are how businesses and IT work together to solve real-world problems, right? So if you look at what a pattern really is, it's a reusable solution to a commonly occurring problem, right? So a great example of a commonly occurring problem is how do we connect Salesforce to a back-end system, either ERP system or it could be a sales compensation system. Every industry needs these integrations, and it becomes, there's a set of patterns of how you solve these problems. We, over the years, have seen a set of patterns that our customers use. We've distilled that information into a document, which we'll speak about in our resources section. But today, we are really going to talk about a few of the newer mechanisms of integration that we are seeing our customers implement. So what's new? Today, we're really going to talk about a couple of new things. Most of them are generally available today, so we are not really talking about anything future. But these are important. These are important because we at Salesforce are moving the App Cloud towards a more event-based integration mechanism. If you learn how to use these patterns and these mechanisms today, as the new integration mechanisms and the new API gets developed, you will be in a position to be able to make better use of that. So today we're going to touch on two different kinds of mechanisms. One is a set of asynchronous mechanisms, and then my colleague and partner here, Dennis Thong, is going to touch on a couple of synchronous mechanisms, one that actually involves some of the UI work as well. So I'm going to get into it fairly quickly. We're going to begin our discussion today by talking about durable streaming. How many of you here know what outbound messaging is? 1, 2, 3, 4. So outbound messaging is a way in Salesforce to send information based on certain criteria to external systems. For those of you that have used outbound messaging, you know that messages last on a queue for up to 24 hours. We have, over many years, heard from our customers saying, there are times when our systems are down for maintenance, or we are upgrading our back-end systems, and we really need these messages to be available for more than 24 hours. We also need for the ability to replay specific messages or messages from a certain point in time. In order to overcome these requests, in order to solve for these problems, we came up with what is known as durable streaming. Durable streaming is also going to form the backbone of our entire event-based processing system. How many of you attended the platform events talk that was given by Hal and Jay Hurst and the others? Did you? One person, yeah. So a lot of that work basically came out of the work that we did for durable streaming. We're actually going to continue to enhance that, and you will see a lot of new cool data integration mechanisms come out next year. So what does durable streaming do? Durable streaming really is very similar to the streaming API. You create a topic, you register a client to the topic, and in order to register that client to the topic, you need either an OAuth token or a Salesforce session ID. The difference between this and the streaming API is in the streaming API, once the notification is issued, if your listener is not capturing the notification, that notification is gone. That is not the case in durable streaming. In durable streaming, we actually hold on to that notification. We hold on to that notification for a certain time period. It's usually 24 hours. With platform events, that is going to start with 24 hours, but Safe Harbor, we are looking at how we can expand the availability of that. So we can maybe give it for 48 hours, 72 hours, maybe even longer if possible. We still haven't figured out what the sweet spot is, but we're working towards it. Works on HTTPS, so all of the interactions that you have with this API is very similar to all of our other API. It's secure, works using HTTPS, and is generally available today. So you can actually go ahead today and create listeners that work on the durable streaming pattern. So I'm going to quickly show you an example here of how durable streaming actually works. All right, let's just make sure that. Oh, sorry about that. All right, so if you look at the durable streaming here, this is a generic demo that I've set up, right? There you go. This is the one. So what you can see right now, the data that you see on the screen actually, and I'm going to go ahead and maybe zoom in a little bit more if I can. You can actually see an account that was created, updated, and deleted. And the account, Dennis, if you can look, was created a few minutes back.
Yes, it was.
Right? It was created about 20 minutes ago, which I created. You can actually pull this back multiple times. I'm going to go ahead and click on home, right? Come back and essentially say, OK, show me all the subscriptions again. It keeps pulling back those notifications again and again. What this shows you is even if you subscribe to the notifications one time, the notifications don't actually disappear from the queue for a period of 24 hours. These notifications will be available in my org until tomorrow evening about 4 p.m. Pacific, give or take a few minutes, right? So this is a great example. By the way, just to let all of you know, the PDF for this deck will be posted on the feed for the session, and it actually has links to all these demo sample code. Everything is available publicly on GitHub, so you don't have to worry about it. You can actually download it, install it in your org, and test it out. So that is a great example of where you would use durable streaming. I'm going to go ahead and move on to quickly talk a little bit, recap that for you. Essentially, you're going to create a push topic using Sockle, just like you would for regular streaming API. You're basically going to create a client that subscribes to that topic using Cometd, which is the protocol that we use. And you can essentially call that with a replay ID. The replay ID mechanism is actually very important. The replay ID is what allows you to let the server know that you want the messages from a certain point in time. Your replay ID is what is going to allow you to use platform events from a certain point in time, and a lot of the newer things that we are working on. Moving on to the next asynchronous pattern. This is actually one of the, I would say, coolest things we've ever done on our platform. This came out of working with a lot of high-volume B2C customers, building websites, building their call center applications on our platform, where when you integrate with legacy systems, sometimes you have systems that take longer than maybe 3 or 4 seconds to respond back with an answer. Our customers felt that in order to give their users a better experience, there needed to be a way for us in Salesforce to pause processing, wait for the return to come back from their backend systems, and then continue processing. In order to overcome that challenge, we basically came up with the concept of continuations. It's actually available in Java, and we implemented that on the Apex platform. So what does continuations actually allow you to do? Continuations, as the name suggests, allows you to essentially call out to a backend web service and pause processing while waiting for the response to come back. And the way it works is the response really comes back and calls a callback method, and tells you, okay, here's my response, I'm giving it to you, you can continue processing. It has a lot of relevance in terms of building UI, in terms of building mobile clients, things like that. Today, however, you can only use it from Visualforce. You cannot use continuations yet from different context. However, calling a continuation itself is fairly simple and straightforward. Your code looks very similar to making a normal Apex callout. You're just going to call the web service and get the response back. However, you're essentially going to write an Apex class as a continuations controller that needs to implement a certain interface and a few methods. That is your way of telling Apex that this class is being used in the process of responding to continuations. So it allows the runtime, the platform runtime, to initiate the callout, pause, wait for the response to come back. Once the response comes back, it basically takes care of associating the response to the right request and sending the information back. So as I mentioned, everything you need to do in order to make continuations work is very, very similar to making a regular Apex callout. The only difference being the additional implementation of a continuations controller in Apex that you can use then from your Visualforce page. So I actually have a little bit of a code, small demo here where I created a continuations class. I'm actually going to show you the code. And again, as I said, the code will be available post this weekend for you all to download from GitHub. So I'm going to switch over into my org here and show you this very basic code that I wrote. So if you look at this, at the code itself, it's calling a Google Maps API, and it's asking for directions from Disneyland to Universal Studios, Hollywood. What you get back really is a string that, a JSON string from the Google API that gives you a whole bunch of options. It's going to kind of look a little kludgy right now. I'm not actually displaying the map to you, but I wanted to show you the raw response and show you how it actually looks like at the, under the covers. So we'll quickly go ahead to the page I have set up here for my continuations demo itself. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And as you can see, I don't have anything set up yet. I have not yet initiated the request. It's waiting for me to click. You will actually see a little bit of a pause. It's not as instantaneous as a real-time request. So I'm just going to click on Start. It was fairly quick, right? The Google API comes back fairly quickly, but there is a pause. Now, should the API have taken a little longer, the page would have waited for a little bit more time and waited for the response to come back. The difference between this and making a regular callout is you're not actually holding up any processing cycles in the Apex runtime, so it doesn't really count against your long-running request timeout limit. That's the big reason why we actually came up with that. So that's my demo for continuations, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis.
Sure. Hi guys. So Hal spoke to you guys about some of the asynchronous mechanisms that we've got in our platform, the newer ones. I'll speak to some of the more synchronous patterns, but these are actually more user interface patterns as opposed to actual back-end data synchronization or remote process information patterns. So I'm going to talk about Lightning Out, and I'm going to talk about Salesforce Connect. So how many of you guys were around when Canvas came out a few years ago? Do you remember that? The first thing, apart from what was it, the first thing most people asked was, where's reverse canvas? So this is it. So we'll just quickly run through a few slides. And so Lightning Out is the reverse of canvas, is basically when you want to embed a Salesforce UI widget in another website. So classic use case is when you have 1,000 service portals out there and you want a case creation widget that you want to create once in Salesforce and expose it everywhere. That's what Lightning Out is a good use case for. So the other thing that Lightning Out really gives you, apart from the ability, I mean, you could argue that you could do that with an iframe, or you could do it quite simply. What Lightning Out really gives you is the ability to share a user context. So when you log into that website, if you're able to get a session token using OAuth, you can then pass that session token in with that into that Lightning component, And when you create the case or when you create the lead, it knows who you are. It's using that session context that you actually establish. It also solves for a lot of problems with embedding other UIs and other URLs within a remote site, primarily around browser security. If you ever try to iframe something and then communicate between the iframe and the parent, you have to do a lot of work. So what this is effectively around CrossOrigin resource sharing. We solve all those problems for you so that you don't have to deal with browser security. So all you really need to do is a few things around embedding a JS library in your remote site, and then doing a little bit of work around creating the component and creating the application. So I'll actually show you how this is done as opposed to draining this slide. So what do you need to do in Salesforce? The first thing you need to do is create what's called a CrossOrigin resource sharing domain. You basically whitelist the domain in Salesforce to say you're allowed to communicate between the two sites. You create a connected app. That connected app basically sets up the security between the remote application and the Salesforce Lightning component. So when you do things like using OAuth, you're using that connected app to establish, I guess, the security between the two applications. It needs a little bit of knowledge around Lightning components and Lightning applications. So you can't embed a Visualforce page, unfortunately, but you're pretty much doing a lot of the new Lightning work that you would probably seen quite a few in a lot of booths around in Dreamforce today. So what you need to do is create a Lightning application that does two things. It extends the Lightning out app that you see up there, and it creates a dependency to the component. So that's as simple as what you need to do to actually expose the actual application. Now, the component itself is not that simple. So you'll have to basically build a work around defining the UI, using the Lightning design system and everything else around it to build that component. But you're only doing that once. You do that once, and then you can extend it and embed it on a whole lot of other sites. So in your remote application, there are really a few things that you need to do. One is you need to be able to establish the security between the Lightning component and the remote site. So a really good library is a good friend of mine, Richard Van Hook, who uses who's written the force.oauth.js library that you can use to establish OAuth between a remote application and Salesforce. And you just need to embed the lightning.out.js library in that remote website. You need to create the Lightning application and the component. So using the $lightning.use function that's embedded within that JS file, you reference that Lightning out application that I showed you. You give it a few parameters, including the OAuth access token that you've established before. And then you also call the $lightning create component function to also create the component. So I'll show you a demo of how this will actually work in real life. Is it
Let me help with it.
What's that?
There you go.
All right. All right. Let's go. So I've got a Heroku application here that's Node.js. This is not Salesforce, so it's a fairly basic container. I do a few things. I mean, a lot of this will be automated in real life, but I can show you the steps of what actually happens. So I'll actually do a log into Salesforce, and using OAuth and the libraries that I've talked about, it established the basic connectivity to Salesforce. So I'm actually getting a session token and using that. So I allow access. And you saw that code that I had previously to create the component and to create the application. That button basically does that. You can see I've actually exposed a component in a website. So this is something that's actually I created a Lightning component to do. You can see my name here. I've actually established the user context with OAuth. If I do something like
DF26, that's awesome.
Sorry?
DF26.
DF26.
I think we'll be there doing this demo again in DF26.
My kid will be 10 years old by then. So that's all code that I've done. And if I actually look at my org, If I refresh the org, you'll see the new case that I've created. So I can do this and embed this in a whole lot of different applications without having, I've only just created one component in Salesforce, and I've easily embedded it elsewhere. So that was the pattern where we expose Salesforce data in another application. I'll show you another pattern that is the reverse of that, and which is Salesforce Connect. So visualizing data from another system within Salesforce. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, when you built integration, you pretty much had to replicate data in Salesforce. Or you had to create a custom web service and use Visualforce to visualize the data. Salesforce Connect gives you that ability to get data into your system without having to replicate. But what you're doing is these objects almost like first-class citizens within Salesforce. You can expose them in a page layout, show them in a list view, do things like reporting and searching, whereas before you couldn't actually do that with things unless you actually physically replicated the data into Salesforce. As usual, if you replicate data in Salesforce, there's expenses involved around maintaining that data, copying across, and just general overhead with having to copy that data. And a lot of enterprise architects actually don't like doing that. So that's why we built Salesforce Connect. Salesforce Connect is actually pretty easy to set up. I'll just show you the demo pretty much straight away without the... So I've got a Heroku Connect database. So this actually took me longer to build than to connect in Salesforce. So setting up the Heroku connectivity, the database, the tables. What Heroku gives you is a URL that you basically use. So I'm going to use OData4. So there's an OData4 endpoint. And when I set up the external data source, I'm pretty much referencing that endpoint. So I've got that, and I've got the tables that I want to expose. So this is all set up in Heroku external objects. In Salesforce, so I put this in the oven a while ago. So when I create the external data source, I'm referencing that URL. I'm putting a few other parameters around. Do I want it to be reportable? Do I want it to be writable, searchable? What are my authentication details? And in order for me to create the objects, what I call the external objects, I really just validate and sync. So what this does is it reads the metadata within the table and actually creates the objects in Salesforce for you without you having to really think much about it. So the two objects that I've created, external orders and external order items, they're almost like custom objects. We've actually done this all automatically for you. When I click that button, it built this for me. What I wanted to do was create a few other things called indirect or relationships that I can actually define relationships between an external object and a Salesforce object, or within external objects and another external object. So the account number, imagine I have an external ID on an account in Salesforce, and that's has the same value that I share in my external database. So I can create an indirect lookup in Salesforce that if I look at the field itself, actually I won't have time to do this, but I can change it to a data type of indirect lookup, and it matches the value from the external data source to my external ID on my account object. Similarly, I can do the same thing with so orders and order items, parent-child relationship. So if I have a foreign key in my external data source, I can relate those foreign keys as well. So order number obviously is a foreign key, so I created an external lookup relationship between that and the parent order. So I actually show you some of these things in action, so I'll promise you that it looks just like any Salesforce list view or object. So I've got list views. All right, so I can define list views, and I can display the data within Salesforce without real significant customization. Right? In the data source itself, my account number is a number. All right, whereas with that lookup relationship, I can actually show that as a lookup. All right, so it's actually stored as 005. I think AccuSage, the external ID for that is 005. Now, if I drill down to the actual order itself.
While Dennis is showing this, I also want to point out this is actually one of those features which has gained a tremendous amount of adoption in regulated industries. So, customers that want to store some very proprietary information on their backend servers, but surfaces up into Salesforce. They're actually using this in production today to keep the data in their systems, but show it on the UI in Salesforce.
All right. So now in my new Lightning user interface, my Lightning experience, I can see the related order items quite easily there, so that's all easily definable. I can also edit the data now. So that's a new feature that came out in the last, I think the last release. So if I change this to $5,000 or something else, $51,000, it updates the external data source. But I didn't have to build an integration to do that. I just basically validated and synced. All right. Something else that I can do, which is also pretty cool, I can search. So that order has the text lorem ipsum. Actually, didn't like me. I'm going to do that again. It is case sensitive, that's what it is. So you can see I've actually searched my external data source, and I didn't have to build an integration to do that. It's natively tied towards my search interface. I can also do reports. So my Dreamforce 16 report, you can see I've created a report that references my external data without me having to build any additional user interface elements. So to that point, we've talked about some of the new patterns and mechanisms that we've added within the Salesforce platform in the last few years. These are some of the resources that you can reference: durable streaming, continuations, lightning out. We've got some of the. I'll actually change this to add my GitHub code in there with the lightning out code. But that's pretty much what you can use for reference, and we'll have the code up shortly, and we'll put this up on the chatter feed for the in the Dreamforce app. So if you guys, there's 2 minutes for questions. So, I mean, there's a mic if you guys have any questions about this or integration patterns in general.
All right. Well, thank you very much for all of you that showed up. Hope you're having a wonderful Dreamforce. And please come back tomorrow. I think there's an entire day of events planned on Friday as part of the mindfulness session. So thank you again for being customers, partners of Salesforce, and you'll have a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you.